Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are stepping up to the plate, and I mean that quite literally.
We definitely are.
Yeah, we are heading into the high stakes, high pressure, and frankly incredibly expensive world of Major League Baseball. But, and here's the twist, because you know we always have a twist, we are looking at it through a lens that I think is going to surprise a lot of you.
It's a fascinating lens, honestly. We're talking about leadership, we're talking about gender dynamics in these ultra-competitive spaces, and we are talking about the absolute friction that happens when you take a century of old-school tradition, the spitting sunflower seeds and the unwritten rules, and you smash it right into modern analytics and female leadership.
Exactly. And we are doing this by unpacking the 2026 release In Her Own League, the new sports romance from Liz Tomforde book by Liz Tomforde. Now, before anyone rolls their eyes and says, wait, we're analyzing a romance novel.
Right. Hold that thought.
Yeah, just pause. Because this book, it is a masterclass in workplace dynamics. It just happens to have some very excellent tension thrown in along the way.
It really does. It's actually a spin-off of her popular Windy City series, but you definitely don't need to have read the others to get this one. The tension here is thicker than the humidity in a Chicago summer.
Oh, absolutely.
And while, yes, it is a compelling romance, it operates incredibly effectively as a business case study. We are basically looking at a fictional scenario grounded in a very real reality, which is what happens when a woman takes ownership of a male-dominated sports franchise.
Right. So let's set the scene for everyone listening. We are in Chicago. The team is the Windy City Warriors. If you know the universe, you know the team. But the context has shifted pretty dramatically here. The beloved old-school owner, Arthur Remington, has retired.
And Arthur was a legend in this fictional world. He's the kind of guy who ran the team like a family operation.
Very much so.
Very loose with the purse strings. He cared about the vibe, he cared about loyalty. But he wasn't necessarily looking at the P&L statements with a magnifying glass. He was sort of the fun grandpa of baseball owners.
Which is all well and good until, well, the money runs out or the wins stop coming.
Yeah.
So Arthur steps down and he hands the reins, complete total control, to his granddaughter, Reese Remington, who is 35 years old.
And this isn't just a here you go, sweetie situation.
No.
That's the first misconception we need to clear up, because the characters in the book certainly have that misconception. Reese is prepared. I mean, she has an MBA from Stanford. She's interned at the league office. She knows the luxury tax implications better than half the general managers in the league.
Oh, yeah. She's a powerhouse.
But the central tension kicks off immediately because you have this new, young female leadership coming in to shake up a very old, very male establishment.
Right, and standing right in her way, or at least standing very skeptically in the dugout with his arms crossed and a scowl on his face, is the field manager, Emmett Montgomery. Or Monty, as the guys call him.
And that is the core dynamic we need to explore today. Literary critics might call this a grumpy sunshine trope, but I don't think that fits here.
No, not really.
This is Grumpy Boss Lady. It's old school versus new school. Beneath the romance tropes, there is a serious conversation happening here about power. How does a female leader establish authority when the entire infrastructure is built to question her competence?
That is the mission of today's deep dive. We aren't just talking about the love story, though. Trust me, we will get to the chemistry because it is palpable. We are looking at In Her Own League as a study on the forbidden nature of boss-employee relationships and the sheer exhaustion of breaking the glass ceiling.
And our sources for today are the text of the book itself, specifically focusing on that dual perspective narrative. We get chapters from inside Reese's head and chapters from inside Emmett's head.
Which is so crucial.
It is vital to understanding the miscommunication.
Yeah.
And we'll also touch on the author's note at the end, which adds a really poignant layer of context regarding Liz Tomforde's personal life and the inspiration behind this story.
I am so ready to get into this. I love a good competence showdown. So let's be the players. Who is Reese Remington, really? Because on paper, to the outside world, she sounds like the ultimate Nepo baby.
She does, and she completely knows it. That's the key to her character psychology. Reese is constructed to defy that stereotype from page 1. Yes, she is the granddaughter. She can change her lineage, but the text makes it very clear. She didn't just inherit this. She earned the right to keep it. She has spent her entire life preparing for this moment.
She's the definition of overprepared. She's the person who read the entire syllabus before the first day of class and already started the final project.
She has to be, though. Think about the stats. She is the first female team owner in MLB history in this universe. and the youngest. Being the first carries a really heavy burden.
Yeah, that representation burnout.
Exactly. She knows that every mistake she makes won't just be attributed to Reese Remington making a bad call. It will be framed as, see, women can't run baseball teams.
Right. If a guy bankrupts a team, he's just a bad owner. If she messes up, she sets the gender equity movement in sports back 50 years. It's an impossible standard.
Precisely. And that pressure creates what she explicitly calls her mask. I found this incredibly relatable for anyone who has ever been in a high-stress corporate job where they felt like an outsider.
Oh, absolutely.
To protect herself, she presents this incredibly cold, detached persona. The book describes her armor. You know, the sharp fashion, the sky-high heels, the stoic demeanor.
She is strictly business. She doesn't smile. She doesn't make small talk at the water cooler.
It's a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
She deliberately separates business from personal. She tells herself baseball's just a business. It's about efficiency. It's about winning. It's about numbers.
Even though it's not for her.
Right. She completely suppresses her own history. The fact that she grew up in that stadium, that she actually loves the smell of the grass, that she used to run the bases as a kid, because she thinks showing emotion is a weakness that the men around her will immediately exploit.
She thinks if she shows she cares, they'll think she's soft.
Exactly. And then you have the foil, Emmett Montgomery.
Oh, Emmett. Emmett is everything Reese thinks she can't afford to be. He's in his 40s. He's the field manager, the guy in the dugout making the split-second calls during the game, and he represents the absolute soul of the game.
He is the baseball is life guy.
Yeah.
He's a widower, which is important context. He raised a daughter on his own, so he has this very deep, nurturing, protective instinct. He views the team as a literal family. To him, loyalty is the most important metric. He's the dad of the clubhouse. He protects his players fiercely.
And for you listeners who have read the previous books in the Windy City series, there's a great connection here. His daughter is Miller, who is marrying Kai Rhodes, the former ace pitcher.
Yeah, that ties it all together nicely.
So Emmett is deeply, deeply embedded in this world. He's not just an employee who clocked in. He is the patriarch of this community.
Which is exactly why the friction with Reese is so immediate and so volatile. Emmett views Reese as an invasive species. She's a threat to the culture he built. And she views him as an obstacle to modernization.
There is a specific example early in the book that perfectly illustrates this clash. It's the conflict over the video coach, Nate. We really need to walk through this because I think this is where the battle lines are permanently drawn.
Right. This is the inciting incident for their professional animosity.
Yeah.
Reese comes in, she looks at the budget, and she sees red ink everywhere. The team is bleeding money because her grandfather was just so generous and unstructured. She notices they have 3 video coaches, but the league standard is only 2.
So logically, mathematically, it's an easy fix. One of these things is redundant.
In a vacuum, yes. She thinks, we're redundant here. We cut one salary to save the bottom line. She chooses Nate, who is the newest hire. It's a logical financial decision. But Emmett absolutely refuses. He storms into her office and says, I'm not firing him.
Why? Is Nate some sort of genius video coach? Does he see things the other 2 don't?
No, it's not about his skill at all. It's because Nate has a family. Because Nate just moved here for this job. Because Nate's wife is currently pregnant. To Emmett, baseball is people. You don't fire a guy with a baby on the way just to balance a spreadsheet. It completely violates his code.
But Reese fires him anyway.
She does it herself. And she does it efficiently. But here is the tragedy of that scene, and it's why the writing is so effective. Emmett sees it as heartless. He calls her out. He asks if she even understands what this does to a real family. And Reese just takes it. She stands there stoic, playing the ice queen.
She doesn't defend herself. She doesn't say, hey, I'm doing this so we don't go bankrupt and lose the whole franchise.
No, she doesn't explain that if she doesn't cut costs, the whole team could go under. She doesn't explain that she's actually trying to save the franchise so everyone, including Emmett, can keep their jobs. She lets him believe she's a monster because explaining herself feels like a weakness. She thinks leaders don't complain about the burden of leadership.
Wow. That sets up such a good tension. You have the head versus the heart, but it's not that simple, is it? Because as we get into the next segment, we start to see why Reese has to be so hard. We need to talk about the environment she walked into. Let's talk about the glass ceiling, or really the glass clubhouse.
It is brutal. The atmosphere isn't just skeptical, it is actively hostile. The book does a very, very good job of portraying the microaggressions and the macroaggressions, frankly, that women in sports leadership face on a daily basis. It's not subtle.
Let's start with the advisory board.
Yeah.
These guys, honestly, reading these scenes made my blood pressure spike.
They are the pure archetype of the old boys club. There was a character named Scott who was particularly insidious. He embodies that gatekeeper mentality perfectly. There is a scene where he refers to Reese as Stanford. He says, "You tell us, Stanford."
It's so patronizing. Like, it sounds like a compliment. Stanford is a great school, but the way he says it, it's a total insult.
Exactly. It's designed to completely undermine her credentials. It implies that her education is just an accessory, a cute little degree daddy paid for, rather than a legitimate qualification. It frames her as an academic who doesn't know the real world of baseball, and then calling her sweetheart or commenting on her appearance. It's a calculated way of reducing her from boss to girl. It's a power play to remind her that in their eyes, she doesn't belong.
And it trickles down. It's not just the men in the suits on the board, it's the locker room, too. There is a player, Harrison Kaiser.
Kaiser, he is the antagonist in cleats.
He's a star outfielder, paid an absolute fortune, but his attitude is just toxic.
Kaiser is the personification of toxic masculinity in sports. He flat out refuses to respect Reese's authority. There's a scene where he mocks her manicure. He says something like, "Don't mess up that pretty manicure of yours, sweetheart."
I wanted to scream when I read that. She signs his check. She is literally the reason he has a job.
That's the irony. He is technically her subordinate, but because of the gender dynamics, he feels entirely entitled to belittle her. He views her presence in the clubhouse as a novelty. To him, she's a distraction, not the owner. He assumes she's there to look pretty, not to lead.
And then there's the media outside the building. This felt very real to me. Reese watches this sports podcast clip, and by the way, don't get me started on the whole trope of sports bros with microphones who think shouting equals analysis, but she watches this guy just rip her apart.
The critique in that podcast clip is so telling. The podcaster criticizes a trade she made, but he doesn't stick to the stats. He doesn't say her WAR analysis was off or she gave up too much prospect capital.
Which would be a fair sports critique.
Right. Instead, he says there's no crying in baseball and tells her to go back to her makeup.
Simply because she traded a popular player, he calls her emotional and impulsive.
Which is the classic double standard. If a male owner makes a bold trade, he's aggressive, he's a maverick, he's shaking things up. If a woman does it, she's emotional or irrational. The expert analysis here is that competence is questioned immediately for women. A man starts with a baseline of assumed competence until he screws up. A woman starts with a baseline of assumed incompetence until she proves otherwise.
And even when she proves it, they say it was just luck.
Exactly. It's the glass cliff concept. Women are often put in charge of failing organizations like this team, which was financially struggling under the surface because men don't want the risk of being attached to a failure. And when the woman struggles to fix the mess she didn't even create, she gets blamed for the mess itself.
And that external pressure completely explains her internal armor. She feels she cannot show a single crack, or the sharks like Scott on the board, like Kaiser in the locker room, like the media will just tear her apart.
And here's where the narrative arc really starts to bend. The dynamic starts to shift. We move from enemies to, well, allies first. And it happens in New York.
The commissioners' conference, this is such a pivotal scene.
It really is. So all the team owners from across the entire league are at this mixer. It's supposed to be a networking event. But describe the visual of this room for us.
It is described in the text as a sea of white-haired men in ill-fitting suits. Reese is physically and socially completely isolated. She is the only woman in the room. And the other owners aren't just indifferent, they are actively excluding her. They turn their backs when she approaches. They ignore her attempts to join conversations. It's a very high school bullying tactic, but played out in a billionaire's ballroom.
And Emmett sees this. He's there as the manager.
He does. And this is so important for his character arc. Up until now, he has seen Reese as the villain owner, the ice queen who fired Nate, the video coach. But in this moment, seeing her ostracized by these men, he realizes she is actually the underdog.
He sees the bullying. He recognizes the power dynamic at play. And Emmett, being the protector, the dad figure we talked about, cannot abide bullying. It goes against his core values. So he steps in. But what I love about this scene is that he doesn't swoop in to save her in a patronizing way. He doesn't fight her battles or yell at the other owners. He steps in to stand with her, to serve as a buffer.
Yeah, he just stands next to her. He talks to her. He validates her presence in the room. He essentially signals to everyone, if you ignore her, you have to ignore me too.
And that small act of solidarity opens the door for real vulnerability. Reese actually drops the mask for a second. She tells him this story about her childhood birthday parties.
Oh, this broke me. This was the exact moment I started rooting for her, not just as a boss, but as a person.
Like a heartbreaking detail,
Mhm.
she admits she used to invite the players to her parties when she was a little girl, genuinely thinking they were her friends. She thought they came because they liked her. Later, as she got older, she realized they were just employees who were obligated to be there because her grandfather was the owner.
That hits you right in the chest. It highlights her intense loneliness. She's always been on the outside, even when she thought she was on the inside. She grew up learning that affection was purely transactional.
And it humanizes her to Emmett. He finally realizes that her business-only attitude isn't just coldness, it's a reaction to a lifetime of transactional relationships. She doesn't trust that people actually like her for her. She thinks they only like the checkbook.
So the wall cracks a little bit there in New York, but the wall comes completely crumbling down in San Diego. This is my absolute favorite part of the book, the scout trip.
This is the competence porn moment,
Hmm.
and I use that term affectionately. It's incredibly satisfying to watch someone be undeniably brilliantly good at their job.
It absolutely is. So they go to a AAA minor league game. Emmett probably thinks, okay, the boss is tagging along. I'll have to explain the infield fly rule to her or point out who is on what base.
Right. He expects to have to babysit the owner. He expects her to be bored or to just be checking her emails on her phone the whole time. Instead, Reese starts analyzing the game on a level that rivals, if not exceeds, his own. She isn't just looking at basic batting averages. She's quoting weighted on-base averages, WOBA, and OPS stats from memory.
Okay, for the listener who might not be a huge baseball nerd, why is WOBA impressive here?
Well, batting average just tells you how often you get a hit. It treats a single exactly the same as a home run. It's a very old-school stat. WOBA, on the other hand, measures the actual value of the hit. It weighs a double more than a single, and a home run more than a double. It's a much more advanced analytical metric. It shows she understands the modern math of winning, not just the eye test of who looks good swinging a bat.
So she knows the math inside and out. She speaks the language of modern baseball.
But she also knows the people. This is the crucial part. She starts talking about the players' backgrounds out of nowhere. She says things like, his sister's a senior in high school, or he plays guitar in his downtime, or his mom's been sick. She reveals that she spent the entire offseason traveling quietly to meet the minor league players and their families.
Wait, pause. The woman who fired the video coach because baseball is a business traveled the country on her own dime to meet the rookies' moms.
That is the exact contradiction that floors Emmett. He realizes that she respects the game and the people just as much as he does. She just shows it differently. She shows it by being incredibly prepared, by knowing their true value, by securing the financial future of the franchise so they actually have a place to play. She cares about the macro so he can care about the micro.
And this is where they find Milo Jones.
Milo Jones, the prodigy. Reese identifies him. He's a player others overlooked. Maybe he's slightly undersized. Maybe he had a bad statistical year previously. But her data and her gut say he's special.
And Emmett trusts her. That's the massive shift. He watches this kid play, sees Reese's analysis, and he's like, okay, she's right. She sees what I see.
And they bond over terrible stadium hot dogs.
The great equalizer.
It really is. It's a moment of shared disgust at the cheap food that turns into shared genuine laughter. The business versus baseball wall is gone. Now they are just two people who deeply love this sport watching a game together. The chemistry starts to completely override the professional boundary.
Which brings us to the big conflict. Because, of course, things can't just go smoothly from here on out. We have to talk about the Harrison Kaiser problem.
Kaiser is the ticking time bomb in the locker room. We mentioned his disrespect toward Reese earlier, but he's also just cancerous to the team culture in general. He's incredibly selfish.
And he crosses the line with Isaiah.
Isaiah Rhodes, Emmett's son-in-law, and a player on the team. Kaiser disrespects him in the dugout. We aren't given the exact transcript of the insult, but it's implied to be deeply personal and nasty. It's enough that Emmett, who is usually calm, usually the Zen master manager, physically confronts Kaiser. He grabs his jersey. It's a moment of pure protective rage.
So now Kaiser has to go. Reese wants to trade him. But here's the nuance we need to cover. Reese actually wanted to trade him weeks ago for financial reasons, right?
Correct. Strategically, she knew Kaiser was overpaid and underperforming relative to his massive contract. She wanted to move him to free up cap space to build a better overall roster. But Emmett had resisted because he didn't want to disrupt the roster mid-season. He thought he could manage Kaiser's ego.
So after the fight, Emmett is finally like, okay, trade him. He's out.
But Reese reveals something fascinating here. She tells Emmett she hasn't traded him yet because she was waiting until he was ready.
That is such a power move, but a profoundly respectful one.
It is deeply respectful. It shows she values his leadership and his pulse on the locker room more than just her own raw authority. She could have overruled him at any time. She owns the team. She literally signs the checks. But she waited for consensus. She waited until the head and the heart agreed.
So she pulls the trigger. Kaiser's traded to Houston, and she brings up the rookie, Milo Jones, to replace him. A star veteran traded away for an unknown rookie. And the media, well, they lose their minds.
The fallout is nuclear. Trading a star player early in the season is seen as career suicide for a GM or owner. The headlines are absolutely brutal. Out of her league. They say she's stripping the team for parts. They say she doesn't know what she's doing. They say she's actively ruining her grandfather's legacy.
And this is where Emmett really shines. Because he could have said, well, it was her decision. I'm just the manager. He could have distanced himself to save his own reputation.
But he doesn't. He backs her play completely. He trusts her discovery of Milo Jones. He stands in front of the press and publicly supports the decision. It's the first time they are truly a united front against the world. He puts his own sterling reputation on the line for her judgment.
And that unity, well, it turns into something else. Let's talk about the romance, because we are now in dangerous territory.
The forbidden aspect is extremely high here. She is the owner, he's the field manager. It is a direct reporting line.
Plus the age gap. He's in his 40s, she's 35.
The age gap is less of an issue legally. I mean, they're both consenting adults in their 30s and 40s, but emotionally it matters a lot. Emmett is a widower who truly thought he'd never love again. He has closed that part of his life off entirely. Reese opens it back up. But the power dynamic is the real ethical concern.
And typically, in these types of stories, the concern is, what if the boss coerces the employee? But here, the employee is a powerful older man who is beloved by the public, and the boss is a younger woman fighting for basic respect.
It complicates things immensely. If they go public, the narrative won't be that Reese is abusing her power. It will be that Reese is sleeping with the manager to control the team, or Reese is unprofessional, or she's sleeping her way to success, even though she already owns the team.
Which makes no sense, but people will say it.
Exactly. The ingrained sexism completely flips the script on how the power dynamic is perceived. People will assume she is using sex because they fundamentally don't believe she has skill.
And someone decides to weaponize that exact perception. Enter the villain of our story, Jeremy, Reese's ex-husband.
Jeremy's piece of work. We learn that he only married Reese to get close to the team ownership. He actually tried to steal the team from her in the past. He's the very definition of a leech.
He's the worst kind of opportunist, and he shows up with photos.
Paparazzi-style photos of Emmett and Reese together in New York. They aren't explicit, but they are intimate. They look like a couple. They show a connection that clearly goes beyond professional.
And he blackmails her with them.
He threatens to release the photos and ruin her reputation. But his demand is highly specific. He doesn't want money. He wants her to step down as president of baseball operations.
He wants her to give up her actual power. He says she can stay owner like a figurehead in a luxury box. But the real operational control would go to the advisory board men, like Scott.
It's a calculated strike at her identity. He knows that if the photos leak, the narrative will be she's sleeping with the help. It will undermine every ounce of authority she has painstakingly built. It will confirm every sexist whisper that she got the job because of her family and kept it because of her sexuality. He's basically trying to force her back into the glass cliff failure narrative.
The stakes are incredibly high. It's not just I'll lose my boyfriend. It's I will lose my legacy, my career, and the respect of the entire baseball industry.
And for a brief moment, she considers it. She considers stepping back just to save Emmett's job, because the scandal would hurt him too, and to stop the deafening noise. She thinks, maybe they're right. Maybe I am the problem here.
But, and thank goodness for this, she decides to take back the narrative instead. Let's talk about the resolution, because she doesn't just fold.
No, she doesn't. Reese realizes that stepping down is just letting the bullies win. It's letting Jeremy and Scott dictate her life. So she employs a truly brilliant strategy.
It goes on the offense.
She refuses to be cowed. Instead of letting Jeremy leak the photos to a sleazy tabloid, she contacts a female journalist at a major sports magazine.
I love this detail. She deliberately chooses a woman to write the story.
It's crucial. She knows a woman will understand the nuance of the double standards. She gives an exclusive interview where she tells the story. She frames the relationship on her terms. She explains that Emmett is her partner, her sounding board, and yes, her romantic interest, but she places it within the context of her leadership, not as a detractor from it.
She basically says, yeah, we're together, and we're winning, so what?
She acknowledges the double standards openly. She says, I know what you're going to say, but I'm not hiding. It completely takes the power away from the blackmailer. You can't expose someone who's already confidently exposed themselves. It creates a nothing-to-hide transparency that actually wins people over. She controls the headline.
And the best revenge is massive success, right?
Ways.
Because on the field, the gamble pays off. Milo Jones, the rookie she found in the minor leagues in San Diego.
He turns out to be a total superstar. Stats were right. The WOBA was right. The team goes on a massive tear. They start winning series after series.
And we get to the epilogue. It's a few months later. Where are the Windy City Warriors?
They are in the World Series.
Yes, I cheered out loud.
It's the ultimate validation. The team that was supposedly in chaos, led by the emotional woman and the old-school manager, is now the best team in baseball. The results silence all the critics.
And Reese and Emmett are still together.
They are. And the dynamic has settled into a true, balanced partnership. There is a lovely moment where they are discussing the future, joking about Max Emmett's grandson maybe taking over the team one day.
It brings it all back to family.
It does, but it redefines what business and family actually mean. They win together. It proves that Reese's way, combining the hard data with the human heart, was the winning strategy all along. It creates a legacy of partnership, rather than just a cold transaction. It heals the deep wound she had from her childhood.
I love that. Now, before we wrap up, we have to talk about the outro, specifically the author's note, because this book, In Her Own League, has a very personal connection for Liz Tomforde.
It does. The dedication is incredibly moving. Liz Tomforde dedicated the story to her mother, whom she lost right after finishing the book.
That adds such a profound layer of emotion to Reese's character, doesn't it?
It really does. When you read about Reese's resilience, her intense need to be strong in the face of relentless adversity, and her desire to honor her family's legacy, you can feel the author's personal grief and love pouring into those pages. It elevates the story from a fun sports romance to a tribute to strong women who hold things together when the world is watching, even when they're hurting deeply inside.
Absolutely. So as we close out this deep dive, let's do our final takeaways. For me, personally, I love the confidence porn. I know I said it before, but seeing a woman walk into a room full of arrogant men and just know the stats better than they do, that is endlessly satisfying.
Yeah.
And I love the protective energy of Emmett, that he fell first energy, or at least that he realized he was wrong first energy.
For me, the major takeaway is the realistic depiction of the glass cliff. I really appreciate that the book didn't sugarcoat how hard it is. It didn't pretend that sexism vanished just because she was the boss. It showed that women often get leadership roles only when things are difficult, like the team operating in the red, and then are judged much more harshly for the necessary risks they take to fix it. But it also showed that you can survive the cliff if you relentlessly trust your own preparation.
It's a romance, but it's also a sobering reality check.
Precisely.
Yeah.
In Her Own League asks us to question why we constantly separate business from family and sports. We tend to think of them as total opposites, cold strategy versus warm emotion. But this story suggests that the best teams and the best relationships need both. You need the OPS stats, and you need to eat the bad stadium hot dogs with the people you love.
You absolutely need the head and the heart. Well, that leaves me with a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. As we see more analytics, AI, and raw data taking over sports management in the real world, how long until the heart is the only human differentiator left in the game? Will the Emmets of the world be pushed out entirely, or will the Reeses realize that the human element is the ultimate competitive advantage?
That is a great question to end on.
Well, that is it for our deep dive into In Her Own League, the new sports romance from Liz Tomforde book by Liz Tomforde. If you haven't read it yet, go pick it up. It's got baseball, it's got top-tier banter, and it's got a very satisfying takedown of the patriarchy. What more could you want?
Hard to beat that lineup.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We'll catch you on the next one.